Hey, Dr. GX here, just popping in real quick like. You know, those in the know that there ain't no party like a P-Funk party because a P-Funk party don't stop. And that can be said for this deeper than deep conversation with longtime George Clinton manager Archie Ivy. So once again, we tear the roof off this sucker. Enjoy. How did the personnel come together for this first Capitol release? Because not everybody came along from Parliament Funkadelic, but some did. A few new faces. How'd that sort of come together like that?
That's an interesting question, and I don't know if I have a frame of reference in that people, because that was been about the time when Steve Washington and Steve and Sheila Washington kind of like joined into the fold. Steve was originally from Slave Aura. He was out of that camp, and Sheila was one of the brides of Funkenstein, but she started dating. Actually, she married Steve. And so that's how he got in. It was pretty much people, whoever was still around and hadn't moved on for just fed up with it or whatever reason. I don't know. Without looking at the lineup to be refreshed as to those personnel changes, I never, until you just posed the question, I never really considered it personnel changes because Gary was still there, Boogie was still there. I mean, the core people were still there.
You have some Bernie, some Bootsy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Bernie Bootsy would primarily, think about, one of the things that, first of all, Bernie was a mastermind behind the arrangements and the musicality of the recordings, because when Bernie would put whatever he put on a track, it would just take it up a notch. It's almost like Emerald throwing down something and saying "Bam!" that's what Bernie Worrell would bring to the table when he would do it. But Bootsy, most of Bootsy's stuff, a lot of that was throwaway tracks. George would just go to Bootsy and say, "Hey man, you got any tracks that you don't like?" Like Flashlight was that. Flashlight, incredible hit record, but Bootsy, it was a totally different thing with Bootsy. Of course, Bernie part wasn't on there. It was just, he had a different bass pattern altogether. But Bootsy's brother Catfish is playing that lick, which is, Catfish played the licks on a lot of James Brown songs when Bootsy and him were with James Brown. And it's just, I call them chinks, chink, 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 chink. And Flashlight has got an incredible thing like that, but it had a great feel. Now, the one thing about Bootsy, that what I said, is Bootsy had a feel like nobody else. I mean, when Bootsy played, he felt it. He was one with his bass, a lot like Jimi Hendrix is one with his guitar. Bootsy's like that with his bass. Now, it might not be as complicated as Stanley Clarke or who's that, Marcus
Miller.
Marcus Miller. It might not seem as complicated like that, but rhythmically in the feel and the emotion that he pulls out from it is incomparable. I don't know if it's if when it comes to his, everybody's not a writer, everybody's not a producer. George honed his craft at crafting songs and recording by doing his homework, listening to Motown, but he also was in the Brill Building, and he got hired by Joe Bett. Brill Building is where everybody wrote. It was where all the writers came every day in New York. So it had that you learned how to do that. What's the name? Carole King was in there. Burt Bacharach was in there. All of them were writing stuff, and you'd walk through the halls and you'd hear these kind of things going on. And that's how George learned how to do songs. And one thing about Bernie and Bootsy, as talented as they are at their craft and their musicality, their musicianship, uh, they fell short of their understanding how to make a record.
And composition.
Well, it's even different than a composition. It's a record because those are two different mediums. Yeah, they make great compositions, but all great compositions don't translate into a good record, especially back in the days when it was records.
Right.
The certain elements you had to be there, that catchiness, that hook line, those things that would generate excitement. They kind of some people just don't. That's not their craft. That's not their skill, and that was something George was very, very good at. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Bootsy with the bass. I saw the show at the Forum, not far from where you were living, I think in 1978, the Monster Rock show.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
Yeah. Bootsy had a sound rig that was only rivaled by, or that would rival Pink Floyd. When he went out, they used to have a cluster. I think that was at that show you're talking about. If I don't know if you remember, but he had a cluster of speakers that hung from the center of the arena. And one of the things that people don't understand, each of Bootsy's strings on his bass had its own pickup and its own sound. He had 4 outlets coming out. And that's why he had that monster bass. It was like an overwhelming sound. When you step on a pedal and stuff, I mean, when he would just kick it into that gear, you get blown away, you know.
Yeah. Bass on steroids, man.
Yeah, totally.
And this record came out, I don't know if it's the same year or year after George's first Capitol, but this was sort of like the closest thing we would see to a Parliament Funkadelic record in the 80s.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And this was on CBS. So
yeah. We were trying to fulfill to maintain that relationship with them. So the stuff that we continued to record, even though we didn't have any more access to advances from them, we did fulfill our obligation and deliver that album to them. And that was the one. And we had a great track on it, Generator Pop. And something happened. I want to say I lost the master to that. And we had to make a copy of it. So the quality of that track is not quite the same as the other tracks.
The fidelity isn't quite
right.
The same.
Yeah. If people, audiophiles, could tell it, you know. And I think that restricted the success. It was a very good track there.
Well, I never felt like the label really gave it its just push, you know. But
they didn't. We were considered to be a troublesome and a mess, and it was basically no, they weren't spending any money to it because they were still, shall we say, disappointed that they didn't get Roger Troutman, which I heard it through the grapevine by Roger Troutman, the record that we had promised them. They had already heard it. They had already done the artwork for it. Ended up on Warner Brothers. And it was a stupid hit. It was a big hit. And Roger followed it up with another hit. And it's interesting. I can't remember the list of songs, but one day George knew that Roger liked to do covers of stuff. And he gave him a list of all these songs, like, and the top of it was I Heard It Through the Grapevine. And then for the next 3 or 4 albums, if you go back through Roger's
Midnight Hour was one.
Midnight Hour, that's how he got all of those the ideas to do those songs. It was something that George had laid out for him.
So this record was the next one, and I thought, even though it didn't have an Atomic Dog on it, I thought from front to back it was definitely a stronger record than the first one.
Yeah, it was. They were, but again, Capitol didn't know what to do with it.
All right, so we're talking about this record, which overall was stronger. The first side is killer with Nubian Nut, Quickie, Last Dance.
Yeah. Yeah, no question. It was well done. We thought it was going to do more than what it did. It had the cute tradition. By this time, George had gotten into doing cute videos. Uh, excuse me. They wouldn't be just the guy singing and dancing. They had like a love story. And so Last Dance was like a mini love story thing that we had with a little bit of animation in it. Excuse me, pixelation animation. Um, and but they didn't Capital just didn't have the machinery.
I would have done that as the first single, Last Dance.
I'm sorry?
I would have gone with Last Dance as the first single on that one.
What was the first single?
Nubian Nut.
Yeah, Nubian Nut. Yeah. Yeah, again, that was I don't know, I think that George might have actually picked that one. Excuse me, I'm coughing a lot. But yeah, that was yeah, Last Dance was, and actually, Quickie was a great track
I
too.
love Quickie. Yeah.
But you know, it's I remember I was over somebody's house at like a gathering, just people casually gathering, and they were playing songs. It was like a little house party, and Quickie came on. Everybody jumped up and danced, right? They were dancing to it, and they wanted to know when was this coming out. I said that was out about 3 years ago. And that's the thing about George is sometimes when you're riding the front of the flashlight, the afterglow is a little further back, if that's making any sense in the analogy. And what I'm trying to say is the thing about having music that's timeless, that doesn't age, is at the time you put it out, it might not be receptive to the basic marketplace. And it actually grows on you over time.
That song, I remember my now wife, when I met her, she was not that into P-Funk. I kind of got her a little more into it, but that track she immediately dug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was great. It was a lot of fun. And there were some sounds. We think by that time we were using sequencers, synclavier, which I don't profess to really understand how it worked, but it was like the start of what then became digital, like music creation and stuff. There was already digital keyboards and stuff, but this was the sequencers and packages. You could move sections around it. Eventually, the concept eventually evolved into what was called Pro Tools, and and then it got into all the boards and stuff. So it was at the very forefront of automation in recording.
This record, Shouldn't Have Bit Fish, was 83, which I saw the show at the Beverly Theater that year, which was a fantastic show. Bootsy came out, blew the roof off.
Yeah.
Prince supposedly was there. Were you at that show?
Yeah, I was there. Of course I was there.
Is the legend true about Prince and being there and then going to do Erotic City?
Yeah, that's why George went and recorded Erotic City. That's probably George has gotten into a couple more covers now. He did Eric Clapton now too, but at that time he hadn't recorded anything for anybody else, and he did Erotic City. But yeah, Prince was he was there on the side of the stage, and I remember one of the guys in the group, Ron Ford, he grabbed a guitar and took it over and stuck it in Prince's face. He said, "Well, you gonna jam with us or what?" And Prince was like, all like you know, like nervous he wouldn't do it and stuff. But he was so moved by what was happening that he went and recorded Erotic City that night.
That show had Hazel, Hampton, Scheider. Everybody was at that show. Maceo.
Yeah. That was great. And there's a recording out there, as unauthorized as it may be, but it's Beverly Hills Live. Yeah, P-Funk Live at the Beverly Hills Theater. Yeah.
How much exposure or time did you end up spending with Prince? Of course, George later was on his label. What was your impression of Prince with whatever time you had with him?
Prince, well, let me go back. When, what was this guy's name? I can't remember his name. I want to say it was Reggie Jones. But he had been Earth, Wind, and Fire's manager. So he was, quote unquote, he was like basically a scout for this white management firm called, he wasn't a scout, but he would find people and then Cavallo and Ruffalo would take over their careers. So he had worked with Earth, Wind, and Fire. Earth, Wind, and Fire was actually formed because Jessica Cleaves was dating Jim Brown, and she wanted to have another group after
Friends of Distinction.
Friends of Distinction, right? And so then Jim Brown was said, "Hey, I've got this group," and then he connected them with. But he told them he had a movie for them to do, which was Melvin Van Peebles' first movie, Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. And so Earth, Wind, and Fire did the soundtrack, but he told them in order for them to do it, they had to have Jessica in the group. So there was a conflict right there. She did their first two albums, their Warner Brothers albums. And then when they got that agreement, they dropped her. She was through with Jim Brown by that time. And anyhow, that's an aside. We're back to, so this guy, I can't remember what his actual name was, and I do apologize to him because he was a great guy. But he calls me up one day and he said, "Hey, I've got this new artist." This is when we were landing the Mothership at the Coliseum. And he says he really likes George and P-Funk. And I want to know, is it okay for him to come and just stand on the stage? He said, I just got him signed to Warner Brothers. And I said, sure. And no problem. So he comes and introduces me to this guy, young guy, and it was Prince, right? And I remember two people whose hands I shook that didn't seem to have any energy. And I guess because they shake so many hands that they don't make a firm grasp. But the same handshake, ironically, was Prince and Michael Jackson. They both had like the same kind of soft, it was, now I'm not saying anything about anything other than that. It's their handshakes were similar. But so Prince, he stayed there. He enjoyed the show, and then next thing I heard about him, he was at the he was there when we brought in. I'm not sure. I think it was Bootsy Stretching Out in the Rubber Band album, and he was in there. I'm not sure the years right here, but it might. I think that's what it was.
Well, wait, let me hold up a sec. Prince's first Warner Brothers album was in '78.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. So, when was Stretching Out in the Rubber Band? Wasn't that about
76?
76.
78 was Player of the Year.
Okay, so it must have been in One Nation. Anyhow, he was sitting in the lobby to bring it out. Well, okay, no, this is it might have been before that, because he was coming to deliver his album, and he heard we were in the A&R offices playing whatever the release we had, and I'm not sure if it was Knee Deep or if it was Prince Bootsy. It seemed to me like it was a Bootsy recording. It might have been Knee Deep, but he told George later when we were in Minneapolis. He said, "Man, I was there the day you guys brought." And I'm sorry, I don't remember the song, but he said the day you guys was playing your album, and I was about to turn my album in, and I couldn't do it. I had to go back and rework the whole thing, and that later became controversy, right? So that was that's another Prince thing.
It sounds like that Earth, Wind, and Fire story where they got knocked off the stage by P-Funk and they had to go retool to try to get as good as P-Funk. But yeah,
there's a lot of stories like that. And but when you come to knocking people off the stage, George was a master. He knew how before the group really snapped to headline status, we were the opening or middle act on shows. And I remember we did this one tour with Rufus and Shaka Khan. And he knew how to leave the audience where Shaka Khan could step on the stage and do no wrong. They were perfectly set up for whatever came next. Or if he tweaked it just a little more, she could come on the stage and do nothing. Because they would literally, P-Funk had tore the roof off, right? And you couldn't follow that. I think he didn't do that until the very last show, and they just gave the full whole thing. But it was that happened to Ward too. I remember we were playing at the Berkeley Community Center, and P-Funk had done their set, and the crowd was when it was over. You know, we had those time things, 45-minute set, maybe 50. And the crowd was just buzzing, right? And then Howard Scott came out, and I think it was him, it wasn't Lonnie, yeah, it was Howard, came out and said, okay, enough of that noise, now for some real music. And the place went crazy. They went to booing and screaming, and they never let them play. And Lonnie like pushed over the towers and like knocked over his organ and stuff. And they eventually had to leave the stage. They couldn't get their show started because of that. So yeah, that was right soon as we were going, because you had to understand the infectious chants of "We want the funk, give up the funk," and "Tear the roof off." I'm going to tear the roof off the Mothership. Those chants were done like a good 2 years before before they were recorded. And that was so and they were like they're infectious in a situation.
A P-Funk party don't stop.
A P-Funk party don't stop. Back to Prince now, because there's one more. I think it's just one more. Yeah, two more actually. When we went to Paisley Park, and we got the tour of Paisley Park, Prince, what I'm going to say is Prince never really like appreciated me, shall I say, because I was always quiet and respectful and stuff. This one time, after he had toured us, he showed us the place where he does because he had a tailor and a seamstress full time upstairs at Paisley Park, and they would make all the fluffy outfits that he liked and stuff, right? Because he's a small guy. I mean, you don't go and find that stuff off the rack. If you try to do that, you could probably have to do in the kids or the women's section. So it wasn't going to be that sexy stuff that he would do. He was a very tasteful guy, genius, no doubt. But he, I'm from Compton, mind you, and this is right when he was right after, I think, I don't know, but anyhow, for some reason, I got the Kim Basinger thing in my mind.
It was around the Batman soundtrack time. Yeah, 89.
Yeah. When was Graffiti Bridge?
90.
90. Yeah. So we might have been like filming Graffiti Bridge then. Yeah, because but I knew that he wasn't still, Kim Basinger wasn't there, but he was there, and we were sitting around being casual, and everybody was, first of all, when George used to talk, Prince would just listen, and he was keen, like with his mouth open and drooling and stuff like a kid, enthused by George's stories and stuff. And George basically he got the idea because he had asked George about how he got Parliament and Funkadelic, and George explained to him the story. And it wasn't so long after that before he became the artist formerly known as Prince. Okay. This wasn't at the same time, but this was during one of those sessions. But at this particular time, we were all sitting around just kicking it, and I felt comfortable enough to make a comment. I said, man, I just want to know, dude, you're the coolest guy on the planet. You got all the money, all the women love you, you make the best music, you're the hottest thing out there, but you can't walk through my neighborhood in those 6-inch spiked heels, right? And he took offense. And I was trying to be polite, telling him like, you're great. Being short is no big deal, right? Everybody's still gonna love you. But he didn't, I don't know. He would purposely have these long pants that if you really wasn't looking, you didn't know he was wearing 6-inch spiked heels.
Yeah.
When underneath. So he after that, he and I never really spoke much. But I tell you this one time, there's a scene in Graffiti Bridge where Prince does this whole dance scene. I don't remember what was happening. I just remember it was this whole Fred Astaire routine. First of all, Graffiti Bridge, Prince did a lot of choreographed dances. Now, what's amazing is these dances were filmed day after day after day. So I'm trying to figure out, when did he learn these routines? How did he know this routine? But this one particular scene, he does it. Now, first of all, mind you, it's like minus 56 below zero wind chill factor. I'm from California, so I was just, amazed when you go to the set from like the one building into the next building that you could like spit on the ground and it would be ice before it hit the ground, right? That kind of stuff amazed me. I never seen anything like that. But it was so cold, you could feel the water in your eyeballs freezing. And so that's what's going on. It was in it, and he had purchased this old warehouse building, and each floor was set up as sound stages, and that's where they filmed Graffiti Bridge. So this one day, this one scene, he he does this whole dance routine, and it ends with him going out the back door to whatever club the scene was at, and he slides down this banister and then hits the ground perfectly, like, and just spins or does something. But when he finished shooting the scene, everybody stood up and applauded because it was that great, okay? And it was perfect. Now, so then after that, he was talking to everybody, and he's got to see the takes on the little playback thing. And it was, he was cool and he was feeling good about himself. So now, outside of that particular part, there was this area with a bunch of wooden tables, like in a schoolyard where you would eat lunch at, right? So that was the area they had to serve the meals to the crew and the cast. And so I was sitting there, and mind you, the generators were just outside the thing, and they would leak water. I don't know why, but the water was coming down and was headed towards a drain that was in the center of the floor. But it was so cold, it was frozen. So Prince comes out of there and he's feeling himself. He knows he had just killed it, right? And he comes bouncing through that area and he hits this slick of ice and goes straight up in the air and falls flat on his butt, right? And now I'm the only one sitting there, right? If it had been anybody else there and I made eye contact with, I probably would have lost it. Because, falls are funny. Slip and falls are funny. They're tragic. It's not funny. I mean, it's happened to me. I didn't know what black ice was, and I slipped and fell on it.
Yeah,
but he slipped and fell, and he looks briefly at me, and then he bounces up and continues that strut on off, like not showing that it affected him. So those are my Prince thing. He's a consummate artist, consummate creative guy. He recorded a song every day. I mean, I'm sure that there will be a time when they're going to just continually release his stuff.
Do you know if there are any other collaborations with George that haven't been released?
Interesting question. No, because after that, I don't say that he didn't invite me back, but I wasn't really keen on going to hang out in Minneapolis. It was not. It was too cold for me. I would suspect there might be, but to definitively state that there are, I can't do that.
When I first heard, two of my all-time favorites are P-Funk and Prince. Probably Stevie Wonder, maybe Herbie Hancock, or the other guys. But
great list.
When I first heard that Prince was teaming up or getting George on Paisley Park, I thought, man, this is gonna blow minds. But I
Yeah.
was disappointed in Cinderella Theory, and I was wondering what your take is on how that sort of collaboration worked or didn't work. And
Well, it wasn't much collaboration. Uh, Prince had ideas. I'll tell you one of the main ones that where we had conflict on stuff. Why should I dog you out? We had conflict because they didn't want me to have anything to do with the video, and I had always written the videos. Okay, we would come up with the concept. I would basically tell them what to do. There's a story behind Atomic Dog, but all the Capitol videos that were cute and well received. Uh, Why should I dog you out? The guy who was then Prince's manager was the guy who directed Purple Rain. I don't know his name, but Prince made him his manager and over his whole operation, and he uh, began to run with that concept, and so he was making a lot of decisions. He didn't last long because he wasn't really equipped for that, but I remember in that video they didn't want me to have anything to do with it, and they wanted George to do a dance, the whole dance routine behind those seamless white screens backgrounds with girls coming in and dancing, and those typical MTV video.
so it was like day glow colors that were popular around that time.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I remember we put the part in there where we brought the flag back, and it's right at the beginning of that video. It says, "Get a little funk, and then you sell out, shake a few rumps, and then you're sold out." And then he takes the flag and says, "We did all that without selling out." And it was like an homage to "We're still here." And but the thing is, he didn't have Bootsy and Bernie. I don't know if they participated on that. If they did, it wasn't at the same level. Bernie might not be on that one at all. Amp Fiddler did a lot of the work. But huh?
I missed those guys on that one.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. But but what happened? One of the things that Prince had a different perspective of George, and he was trying to make it totally George. And George be the first one to tell you it's not about me. We're doing his final tour now, and it's a lot of people are looking at this as being the demise of the group, and so we're trying to define and make it known to the public that the band is going on, and George's role in the shows has been less and less over the past few years, but he's still the master of ceremonies. He's still that persona that's larger than life, and it's going to be hard for us to overcome it. But with one of the things that Prince told George, he said, "George, what you need to do is fire all your band and get you a bunch of young guys." And that look you have on your face is pretty much the look George had on his face. I remember it was about like before the second album, or when Prince came to one of the gigs we had or something. He was there, and he came up to George and he said, "Man, why didn't you tell me that was the dumbest thing I could have ever said?" Right?
It sounds like he was looking at George the way he looked at himself, but Prince's model was totally different from George Clinton's model.
Exactly. Yeah. And he was trying to recreate George along those lines, and it didn't quite work that well.
We kind of skipped over this one, which was the last Capitol record, R&B Skeletons, which I thought was really strong and had you mentioned Steve Washington, he was very prominent on this one.
Yeah.
And Do Fries Go With That Shake was a hit of sorts. So how come the Capitol thing came apart?
We didn't really want to be there. They had problems. They had the FBI or whomever had busted them for payola. So they were real skeptical about how their promotion department was running. It had also come out that their R&B promotion people they had to revamp that department because the field guys were selling copies of Atomic Dog out of their trunk. And we weren't getting reports at. Like one of the biggest things that we always point to is that if you ask Capitol, they'll tell you Atomic Dog never went gold.
It should have crossed over.
Well, yeah, well, it did in the club world.
Yeah.
And it did in the real world. Like now, it's popular. Like they're
It's in
using it
commercials.
e-commerce or something.
Yeah.
It's like, Atomic Dog is everywhere. It's in all the. It's going to be in. I don't know if I can talk about that, but it's in all kind of movies, right? So these. It's like what I said. Time. Sometimes things have to catch up to themselves. But Atomic Dog was like, and it sounds. I don't know if it sounds braggadocious or what, but I'm serious in saying that record went on the radio was it late '82 or early '83 or something, and didn't go off for like a good 10 years. It remained not in heavy rotation, but you were going to hear it once a day. And in clubs, I said it went gold just in club DJs having to refresh their copies of it to play in the club.
You know, I was a club DJ from late 70s through early 90s, and also ran a mobile disc jockey company. And so I followed the charts and all that really closely. And I was aggravated, that something like Atomic Dog wasn't high in the Hot 100 and stuff like that. I felt like, what the heck is going on, man?
Yeah. Well, they couldn't do the resources, and I'm trying to think if that was the time when they had other artists that they were trying to promote as well. That the hardcore R&B, their whole promotion staff was out of Philadelphia, so they were like serious throwback R&B. They were more comfortable with the Peabo Brysons and that kind of stuff than they were dealing with a George. Melissa Morgan, remember George was at a radio station and the Capitol promotion guy was there with George and Melissa Morgan. He brought him bro. And the radio guy kept talking up Atomic Dog. This was before it was released as the single. And to the extent that the radio guy the Capitol guy told the radio guy, well, we don't want to promote that one right now. We're trying to promote, Melissa Morgan. And this is with George sitting right there, right? Yes. So Capitol was a strange place to be.
Wasn't there some crossover with Tom Vickers being at Capitol when George went through there? Or
was Tom at Capitol? I don't remember Tom ever being at Capitol. I remember he was at Polygram.
I thought he might have spent time at Capitol. Maybe I'm wrong.
He might have. I don't know, but I don't think that was at the same time. Yeah.
Overlooked track on this album that's one of my favorites from the '80s is Cool Joe.
Cool Joe.
That's a jam.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Really like funk.
So did your role change if we're looking at mid-late 80s versus mid-late 70s? How did your role change, if at all?
Well, I went from publicist to basically manager focused on tour to advisor, consultant, manager focused on legal battles, dealing with lawyers. So yeah, the role changes with a brief stint as being the head of Uncle Jam Records for a short time.
That last one doesn't sound as fun to me, Archie.
No, it wasn't. And it's
important, but not as fun.
In the middle of them, yeah. Yeah.
So, and
that's the line I got in. So wherever it takes me.
You stuck with George through the '90s and the P-Funk All-Star stuff, and the records started getting less frequent, but the touring kept on almost nonstop.
And it still does. It's always been about the live show. That's an experience that it is not to be equaled. and it's not to be. I mean, look, it's an experience that people who aren't religious, it's the closest thing to a religious experience that they could have. They don't know a spiritual experience they could have. They don't even know how to explain it, but they marvel at the experience that they do have. And it's interesting because, like I said, if you look at the set list, it seems like it's the same songs. But if you listen to the sets, they're played slightly different. This will happen. And George does that on purpose. This is about because different people are on fire different nights. Okay, I'm not going to say it has to do with those like the statisticians and stuff, where they talk about the algorithms of the human body and the changes at this time it's high.
Biorhythms.
Biorhythms, yeah. So, but it could be that, but just sometimes just attitude. And George will point to the one or call because he's listening constantly to what's going on, and he can hear who it is. And all of a sudden he'll say, "Shh, shh, shh, Lodge, come up here," and he'll call him up, and then it's his turn to solo, and that happens quite often because he's listening to see where that funk jumps, where the one jumps from here to here to here to here, and who it's falling on now.
Wow, you're much brighter now. So we turned on lights in Archie. We got the spotlight on you. Now you're really on stage. So I've seen P-Funk, since the 70s, dozens and dozens of times through all the eras. And I thought in the mid 90s and around there and a little bit after, it was always great, but it wasn't maybe quite where it was. But then I felt like it got rejuvenated with some of the youth that came in a few years back, and that for the past 5 years at least, however long it's been, that it's got new energy, and I think it's better now than it had been in maybe 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, and a lot of people have that, and people, and especially the more familiar they get with it, they have their moments and their eras and their favorite conglomerates, okay, or their favorite versions, and they get stuck on it. And then there's a couple of them online. There's a couple of them that just go to all the shows. One guy is called P-Funk One, and he travels all over the world to see the shows.
P-Hat.
Yeah, and he's given thumbs up on a lot of shows. He went through an era when it was like thumbs down a lot, but he still kept hanging in there. And then slowly you get caught up in it. And then he gets back to thumbs up again. And it's unfortunately, you can never have your first experience again. Okay. And sometimes if that first experience is so great, then your expectations are at a level that, for whatever reasons, they don't ever get fulfilled again. But then after a while, old things become new. And I don't know if it's the energies of the people or just the way they decide to make the subtle arrangements in the shows and what songs they choose to perform. But there is definitely a new life now. They just had a very, very good tour of Australia with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And by the end of the tour, the Chili Peppers was basically having P-Funk come out on stage, and they started setting them up to play parts. And when they start playing Give It Away, it was just like a party there. And the people over in Australia went bananas. Okay.
Yeah, and they're a great example. We talked about P-Funk influencing so much, like rap and stuff, but big influence on rock too, and especially that like branch of rock that the Chili Peppers and other groups like that followed in. But the show now should not be missed. I recommend it highly. And I've seen them probably about 3 or 4 times on this like configuration of the band. They're coming through again in July, in I think Greensboro or something like that. So I'm hoping to catch that one. What else did I want to ask you? In all these years, what's the biggest conflict or disagreement you ever had with George?
We had a real big one. He, for some reason, he had a notion that I wasn't making good decisions in terms of his booking. And he wanted to put somebody to work with me that I didn't believe in, because they had no background. They were coming from someplace completely different, from a different world. That one was, I even stepped away for a brief period just to see it until, and I don't remember what happened, but we were able to get past that, and he called me because something happened and he knew nobody could deal with it but me. There was a time when I first came on, and we wanted to define things. There's a famous recording that was released on Casablanca, an interview with George Clinton about the whole landing of the mothership and everything, or the close of Dr. Funkenstein or something. But it's me doing the interview. I'm the one doing the talking. And the whole first year or two, when we used to do radio call-ins, I would do the call-in, okay, and talk for George. And I remember when it came to the time and he was telling me like, yeah, man, you can do the phone in, right? And I said, not anymore, man. Like, the world knows who you are, and it's you need to be heard. So that moved in a way, but alongside of that, what went along with that, he also let me make a lot of decisions unilaterally. And I wouldn't even have to check with him. I did. And at this point, I don't even remember what the decision was, but it was one day, something I said, and he didn't, back me up on it. And it wasn't like a big conflict, but it was just, okay, well, this ship has sailed. And from that point on, I always explained to him anything that I was intending to do, or presented it to him as to what's available to do, and allowed him to make his own decisions. But we never really had conflict. And I think the main reason was because I never was involved with the money. That's usually where management and artists get odds, because money is the love of money is the root of all evil. And money is a temptation that you would, and I used to really dislike when we would be playing shows and I would be the one who have to go and pick up the balance of the guarantee or whatever money. I remember once we were in the Capitol Center in DC, sellout show. I think this was a show when George, at the end of the show, he ended up butt naked on the screen, right? On the big, what do they call those things? Jumbotrons in those days. So, and he had on the sheet, and then he pulled it up and he was butt naked under it. And, but in that show, I go to pick up the money. Now, I dress like P-Funk. This is before I start wearing suits and stuff on the road dealing with stuff. But I would be dressed like, a fan. And I remember picking up, and it was like, we were picking up like something like $50,000, 50-some thousand, some odd thousands of dollars. And I started packing them on me, so I look, so there's no bulges or stuff. I just pockets and have, a flight suit, military flight suit on and stuff. And when I get ready to leave, the promoter says, wait a minute, I'll call 2 guards for you. And I said, I don't think so. If I walk out of here now, ain't nobody gonna know.
Be too conspicuous. Yeah.
But you put 2 guards around me. Now I'm a target. No, thank you. Right. And so I went and partied the rest of the time with the in the audience with all this money on me. But yeah, so it was those are the rare occasions when I had that responsibility. But for the most part, we always had accountants. We always had bookkeepers, we had tour accountants, road managers. Other people were responsible to handle the finances. And quite often, those people took advantage of those positions. So when you're dealing in the business and there's so much cash going around, it's easy to misplace $1,000 a show when you're dealing with $75,000, $100,000 a night. It's easy to misplace $1,000, and we're doing 50 or 75 shows a year. Well, that road manager, that tour manager, could get quite a stash over the long haul. I won't name names, but we ran into situations where
Skimming.
a couple of them did that. Yeah. So I think that's the main why we really didn't have big conflicts. We became friends first. Okay. And so I enjoyed hanging out with him. Even though I was writing stories about him or stuff, again, I was going to the studios because of my connection with Raz and Eddie. And then Georgia let me be there and we'd talk and just kick it. And sometimes if somebody asked me something, I would write about it. But so I had total respect for what he was doing as a creative artist.